day. Welcome to Storytime. What is that behind me? I'm in a pretend room today. Have you ever been in a pretend room? Have you ever sat back and closed your eyes and pretended that everything around you was completely different? Maybe that the sky was pink and the grass was orange? Maybe horses flew and birds crawled on the ground? That's silly, isn't it? I've got some silly stories about some silly people today. So I think we should go ahead and get started, don't you? Clap your hands if you love stories. Clap your hands, I know you do. I'm so glad that we could be together. Glad to share a story time with you. Let's get started. All right, we're going to have two stories today that involve someone being foolish and silly, but maybe it not being such a bad thing after all. So we're going to start with a story called The Quest for Cleverness. And it's about a king's son, the prince. A long time ago, there was a king who had a son who was very silly. And his father sent him to school for many years, trying to help him learn how to be smarter, how to think better. But all of his teachers, one by one, eventually gave up. They were trying to teach him out of books, and he could remember dates and numbers and names of famous people. But he wasn't very good at being smart. He wasn't very good at coming up with the right solutions to problems. He just didn't seem to think with all of his brains. And eventually the king decided this isn't going to work. Regular school is apparently not what my son needs. He decided he needed some real life experience. So they decided they were going to send him on an adventure. But they knew that since he sometimes had trouble thinking, they needed to make sure he was really prepared. They got him a horse that could absolutely be counted on to be reliable. And they got him fine clothes to wear. And most importantly, they gave him a pouch full of enough money that he wasn't going to end up completely out of everything and out of food and not able to even put a roof over his head when it rained. And they sent him off to see what he could learn outside of books. Well, the prince was very excited. He'd never been on an adventure like this before. And he knew his father had said, "Please try to save your money. You might need some later." But sometimes the prince had trouble remembering that. And so when he came to his first town and his first bustling, exciting marketplace, he couldn't wait to buy some very, very interesting things. And so as he was wandering through the marketplace, he saw a bird in a cage, and it was all pretty colors and just lovely where it sat on its perch. And he said, "How much is this bird?" And well, the person selling the bird said, "It's a very, very special bird, so it's quite expensive." He said, "Well, what makes it so special?" And the owner said, "This is a magic bird. And whoever it sings to, it will put them to sleep right away. If you ever have trouble sleeping, Your Highness, this bird will do better than any lullaby." The prince said, "I have to have it." And so he took a lot of money out of his pouch, and then the bird was his. Well, the next booth he came to, there was a little tiny cage with a beetle in it. Beetle's a little bug. And he saw the price tag hanging off the cage, and he said, "What on earth makes this beetle worth almost as much as a fine horse?" And the person selling the beetle said, "Oh, this is a very, very, very special beetle. It can gnaw its way through any wall or piece of wood or even a rock in the whole world. It has jaws just that strong." And the prince said, "That's amazing." And then he paid the money, and the beetle was his, and his pouch was getting much lighter. And finally, he came to another stall where there was a lovely golden cage, and in it was a flapping, fluttering butterfly. And it didn't even look like a really special butterfly. It was white and delicate about its wings. And he said, why would this butterfly deserve to be in a golden cage like this? And the owner said, it's a very, very special, magical butterfly. And the prince said, why is this butterfly magic? What does it do? And the owner said, this butterfly is strong enough to carry on its wings any weight that is put on it, and it can fly through the sky as if it were nothing at all. And the prince said, I must have it. How much is this butterfly? And when the owner told him, he swallowed hard, because that would be almost all of the money that was left in his purse. But he looked at the butterfly and he thought, I have to have it. And so he paid almost to the last coin. And then the butterfly was his. And so there he sat on his horse with his bird and his beetle and his butterfly. And he realized he didn't have enough money left to stay at the inn in town. He wasn't quite sure where he was to go. He thought maybe if there's a castle nearby, the person who owns it will be a friend of my father, and they'll let me stay there. And he saw, he thought, a castle up on a hill, not terribly far from the city. Certainly his horse could carry him there. And so off he went, heading toward the castle. And it was trouble getting there. There were thick woods that he had to get off his horse and lead the horse through, because riding through would have knocked him down. And there were vines hanging that were too dense for him to see through, that he had to push away with his hands. And finally, when he came out of those woods and saw where he was, he knew he had made a terrible mistake, because the castle that he had seen was not an ordinary castle. It was a giant's castle. He was in the land of giants. They were certainly no friend of his father's. And there was a giant sitting in front of the gate of the castle. And he had a big sword on his shoulder. And he was obviously guarding this castle. And he looked up, the prince did, and he saw up on the wall there was another castle, another giant sitting on the castle. And he had a giant axe in his hands. He was another guard. But when he looked around the corner of it, he saw a window where there was a lovely princess sitting with her head in her hand and a sigh on her lips. She was so sad. And the prince had learned a few things from the books that he had read before he had gone on his adventure. And one of them was that a prince must always rescue a princess in distress. It was the rules. And so he decided to call up to her. And he said, "Psst, is there any way that I can help you, princess?" And the princess said, "I'm afraid you might as well leave without trying. The door of the palace is guarded by a massive giant. They don't want to let me leave. I've been here for long, long years, and no one has ever been able to rescue me." And the prince said, "But they didn't have what I have." And so he took the bird and he released it from its cage and told it, "Fly around the corner and sing to the giant." The bird did as it was told. The giant had time for one massive yawn before he was crumpling to the ground, fast asleep. The princess was very surprised, and she said, "But that's only one of the giants. There's another giant up here, and I'm afraid he's wide awake. He doesn't look like he's going to sleep anytime soon." And so the prince said, "Never fear." And so he called to his bird and he said, "I want you to fly up and sing even harder than you did before, and make that giant fall asleep as well." And so the bird did, and so the giant did. And the princess said, "This is amazing, but it still doesn't really help, because the walls are too high to climb down, and they're all locked with a key that I can't even lift, and I'm afraid it's hidden as well. I have no way to get out of the castle." The prince said, "I have other secrets." And he took the beetle out of its cage and pointed at the door and said, "Gnaw through, little beetle." And the beetle gnawed its way through the door. And once it was through, It gnawed the hole bigger and bigger so the prince could climb through. And he climbed all the way up to the top where the princess was waiting. And she said, "You're my hero. But how are we to get away from this dungeon? I've been here trapped in this castle for so long that my legs are weak." And the prince said, "And I don't think my horse can carry both of us all the way back to my home. But I have a third surprise." He carried the princess down and through the door, and when he got there, he took the butterfly out of its cage. And he picked up the princess and he placed her on the butterfly, which seems like a bad idea. It seems like a princess would squash a butterfly. But the person who had sold the butterfly had not been telling a lie. That butterfly was so strong that it carried the princess on its wings as if she weighed nothing at all. And it fluttered into the sky, and the prince climbed onto his horse with his bird and his beetle. And together the two of them made their way back to his home, back to the castle, where the king was stunned to see his son return with a beautiful princess. And he said, "Never again shall anyone in the kingdom call my son silly." And they lived happily ever after. I bet you already know how to do the Itsy Bitsy Spider, don't you? You guys can probably do it better than I can. Let's go ahead and try it together, shall we? If you're advanced, you can do it like this. If you don't feel like you're able to do that, you can always make a spider climb up like this. Or I've seen some people just make spiders. However you want to do it. That's just fine because it's your spider, okay? So here we go. The itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. And the itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again. Now we're going to make a teeny tiny spider. If you're making your spider crawl up, make it just a little teeny tiny one. Here we go. The teeny tiny spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. And the teeny tiny spider climbed up the spout again. But what about a big and fuzzy spider? Have you ever seen a big and fuzzy spider? They're okay. They're not so scary. They're our friends. So remember, if you're making your spider climb up here, make it nice and big and fuzzy. Alrighty? The big and fuzzy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. And the big and fuzzy spider climbed up the spout again. Awesome work, guys. Now in our second story, which is called The Foolish King, this time it's not the prince who's being silly, it's the king himself. But the problem with this king is that even though he was very, very, very foolish, he believed he was the most clever person in the whole kingdom, and no one was going to tell him otherwise. Every time he spoke, everyone around him said, "How wise, Your Highness. You are the most brilliant man, Your Highness." But eventually, the king got tired of the compliments. They were all the same, and always from the same people. He decided to find out if there was anyone in the world who was as clever as him. He didn't think there would be. But he ordered his ministers to go out and to find someone who could claim to be cleverer than him. He said, "Search the whole world. But if you bring them to me, and I can beat them in a test of our wits, then he will be thrown into jail." So the ministers went out, and they searched and searched for someone who could try to beat the king. But even though there were plenty of people they found who were much more clever than the king, nobody wanted to take the risk of being thrown in jail if there was some sort of trick being played. until they finally came to one small village. And this was a poor village. They were not doing well. You see, the king's men had taxed them. That means they took some of their money, and they had taxed them so much. And they had taken the farmland from the people. So the people were first forced to work on farmland that they didn't even own anymore. And they were suffering. But despite their hardship, they were very nice to the king's ministers when they came. They were polite, and they shared what little they had with them. And they told stories and poems and riddles. And during the course of the evening, the ministers noticed one particular man who seemed even sharper than all the rest of the people there. He was quick with answers to any question, and he told jokes that were very smart. His name was Vonik. And when the king's ministers grew tired and were beginning to head to bed, they approached him first and made the suggestion to him. They said, "If you can beat our king in a test of wits, you may ask for whatever reward you wish, and he will give it to you." And Vonik thought. He knew the risk. He knew that if he didn't win, he would be thrown into jail. But he decided that it was worth the risk to try. And so he went back with the ministers to see the king. The king looked at him and he said, "So you think you're pretty clever, do you? I challenge you to trick me. But I'm warning you, I'm very smart. You're not going to be able to trick me." And Vonik replied, "You know, I'm actually afraid of that now that I look at you. You seem very, very smart. I wouldn't have come all this way like this just to try to beat you if I'd known how smart you were without bringing my trick-playing tools with me." The king said, "You use tools to trick people?" Vonik said, "Only the smartest, but of course I do. And they're all back in my village." The king said, "I think I would like to see such tools that can trick people. You may go back to your village." And Vonik said, "But unfortunately, I will need so many. It will take 100 horse-drawn carts to bring them all back." The king said, "You may look in my stables and take whatever you need, but come back as soon as you can." And so Vonik did. He took 100 horses and 100 carts and brought them all back to his village. And so once he got there, he gave the horses all around to all of the villagers, and with the help of those strong horses and all of those carts, they were able to complete an entire season of harvesting and cultivating in a very, very short time. Much more than they would have been able to do without. They gathered all of the grain, they cut it, and they were so happy. And Vonik returned with all of the carts that were now full of empty wine containers. Came back. And the king welcomed him, and he demanded to see what Vonik had brought back with him. The king's dog came into the room with him. The king always kept his little dog with him. And seeing the stranger, the dog went up to Vonik and sniffed at him. You know how dogs do. And Vonik said, "There's a problem, Your Majesty. Your dog is telling me that my wife has suddenly grown very, very sick. I must return to her immediately. Please, lend me your fastest horse so that I may go to her side." And the king said, Fine. It's important that you be with your wife, but you must return very, very quickly. You must come back within a few days." And so Vonik dashed back to the village. And when he got there, he found a donkey. And he rode back to the king on the donkey instead of on the fast horse. And the king said, "What took you so long to come back? And this isn't my horse. What did you do?" And Vonik said, "The horse you gave me turned into a donkey halfway there. Why would you give me a horse that would turn into a donkey?" The king said, "I'm very, very sorry. It was embarrassing. He thought that he had the finest horse in the world, and his horse turned into a donkey? What if anybody ever found out? He was very embarrassed." And Vonik said, Never mind that. It's all right. And the king said, "Now, sit down. Are you going to try to trick me now?" And Vonnegut said, "Let me ask you some questions. First, have you ever heard of someone using tools to play tricks on someone?" The king said, "No, actually I haven't." And Vonnegut said, "Then why on earth would you believe me when I said I needed tools to trick you?" "It appears that I've already tricked you once, Your Majesty." The king had no alternative but to say, "Yes, it looks as though you did." "And now," said Vonnegut, "in all the time that you have had him, has your little dog ever spoken to you or to anyone else?" The king had to admit that no, his dog had never spoken before. "Then why did you believe me when I said that it spoke to me?" The king had no answer. "And finally," said Vonnegut, "has a horse ever turned into a donkey? Any horse that you've ever heard of? Let alone this fine horse that you had given me. Have you ever seen your horse turn into a donkey?" The king said, No, I've never heard of such a thing." And Vonnegut said, "I have tricked you not once, not twice, but 3 times, Your Majesty." And everyone had been watching and listening, and the king, he had no choice but to say, "You have beaten me. You have earned your reward. What do you want?" And Vonnegut said, "I want you to give me something that you never use." The king said, "That sounds like a very good deal on my half. What is it?" Vonnegut said, "Your brains." The king was scared, and he started to tremble. He said, "I don't know how to give you my brains." And Vonnegut said, "That is a very, very tough puzzle, how to do that. I will make you a deal. Instead of your brains, you can give me the farmlands that used to belong to my people that you've taken." And the king was relieved not to be giving away his brains, and so he agreed. And when Vonnegut went back home and told everyone that they had their lands back, everybody cheered and praised him, and they knew that he was indeed the cleverest man they had ever met. All right, everybody stand up now. We have to do our song today, and it's going to involve moving all the parts of our body. And it's easier to do that when we're standing up than if we're sitting on a chair, right? We're going to be clapping our hands and stomping our feet. Now, while I'm playing the ukulele along with you, it's hard for me to actually stomp and tap and clap and all of that. But you know what? You guys are really smart, and I don't think I have to demonstrate how to clap your hands. Do I? You guys can probably figure out how to do that on your own because you are so super smart. So here we go. Get ready. Hands are clapping, clap, clap, clap. Hands are clapping, clap, clap, clap. Hands are clapping, clap, clap, clap. Clap your hands, my darling. I think some of you weren't clapping along. We're supposed to be clapping now. Let's try it one more time. Hands are clapping, clap, clap, clap. Hands are clapping, clap, clap, clap. Hands are clapping, clap, clap, clap. Clap your hands, my darling. Better! Now we'll tap our toes. Toes are tapping, tap, tap, tap. Toes are tapping, tap, tap, tap. Toes are tapping, tap, tap, tap. Tap your toes, my darling. Good job. Feet are stomping, stomp, stomp, stomp. Feet are stomping, stomp, stomp, stomp. Feet are stomping, stomp, stomp, stomp. Stomp your feet, my darling. I can feel the floor shake from here. Fingers are wiggling, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Fingers are wiggling, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Fingers are wiggling, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle your fingers, my darling. Good job. Heads are nodding, nod, nod, nod. Heads are nodding, nod, nod, nod. Heads are nodding, nod, nod, nod. Nod your head, my darling. Now we're going to try a tricky one. Kids are spinning, spin, spin, spin. Kids are spinning, spin, spin, spin. Kids are spinning, spin, spin, spin. Spin my kitties, darling. Let's try that again, only faster. Kids are spinning, spin, spin, spin. Kids are spinning, spin, spin, spin. Kids are spinning, spin, spin, spin. Spin my kids, my darlings. There. Hands are clapping, clap, clap, clap. Hands are clapping, clap, clap, clap. Hands are clapping, clap, clap, clap. Clap your hands, my darling. Did you enjoy our stories today? I hope you did. Where I am recording right now, it's actually pretty ugly outside. It's cloudy and it's thinking about trying to rain. So a story time like this, spending time with you, certainly is the sunny part of my day. I'm still missing some of you here at the library. I've seen some of your smiling faces come in. I've even seen some of you leave with hand stamps on your hand. I don't know how that could have happened. We've got lots of books, we've got lots of movies and other things to check out, some games. Do you like to play games? So come on in and see us. Or if you can't, I'll see you here next week, just like this. Maybe you'll even do both. For now, let's get a good stretch, shall we? Reach for the ceiling. And touch the floor. Stand up again. Let's do some more. Touch your head. And now your knees. Up to your shoulders. Like this, you see. Reach for the ceiling. Ugh. And touch the floor. That's all there is. There isn't any more. See you next week.